Right now, millions of American workers are making a decision that could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement, and most of them don't even know they're making it. It happens in the first week of a new job. You sit down with HR, you fill out some paperwork, and somewhere in that stack is a single checkbox. Traditional 401k or Roth 401k. Most people pick one in about 10 seconds, based on nothing more than a guess. And that 10-second decision quietly follows them for the next 30 or 40 years. Here's the strange part. Both accounts can hold the exact same investments. Both can grow for decades. Both are designed to help you retire comfortably. But depending on which one you choose, you could end up with a very different amount of money in your pocket when you're 65. Not because of the stock market, not because of luck, because of a single, often misunderstood variable: taxes. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how these two accounts work, which one actually makes sense for your income and your age, and the one mistake that quietly drains retirement accounts for people who never bothered to ask the question. Because the truth is, the right answer isn't the same for everyone. It depends on where you are in life right now and where you expect to be later. Stick with me, because the ending of this video reveals something that even financial advisors get wrong more often than you'd think. Let's start with the basics, because a lot of people think a 401k is an investment. It's not. It's a container. Think of it like a suitcase. The suitcase itself doesn't do anything. What matters is what you pack inside it, and just as importantly, when the airline charges you a fee. A traditional 401k works like this. The money comes out of your paycheck before taxes are taken out. So if you earn $70,000 a year and you put in $10,000, the IRS only taxes you on $60,000 that year. Your tax bill today goes down immediately. That money grows for decades without being taxed along the way. But when you retire and start withdrawing it, every single dollar you take out is taxed as regular income. A Roth 401k flips this completely. You pay taxes on your paycheck first, the normal way, and then the money goes into the account. It grows for decades, same as before. But when you retire, you don't pay a single dollar in taxes on your withdrawals. Not on the money you put in, and not on any of the growth. So on the surface, it looks like a simple choice. Pay taxes now, or pay taxes later. But this is where things get interesting, because the real decision isn't about now versus later. It's about a bet you're making on your own future. Here's the hidden truth most people never think about. When you choose a traditional 401k, you're making a bet that your tax rate will be lower in retirement than it is right now. When you choose a Roth 401k, you're betting the opposite, that your tax rate later will be higher, or at least the same, as it is today. For decades, financial advice assumed almost everyone would be in a lower tax bracket after they stopped working. That used to be a safe bet. But something has changed, and most people haven't caught up with it. Let's talk about why. The federal government currently has trillions of dollars in national debt, and a huge portion of the federal budget depends on tax revenue that funds programs like Social Security and Medicare. Current individual tax rates, set by a law passed back in 2017, are scheduled to expire and reset to higher levels unless Congress acts. That means the tax rates you're paying today might genuinely be some of the lowest rates you'll ever see in your lifetime. Most people don't realize that. They assume taxes only go up for other people, for the wealthy, for corporations, for someone else. But federal income tax brackets apply to everyone who earns money, and history shows they change more often than people expect. Now here's a real example to make this concrete. Imagine two co-workers, Sarah and Mike, both 28 years old, both earning $55,000 a year at the same company. Sarah picks the traditional 401k because her paycheck feels bigger today. Mike picks the Roth 401k because his old high school economics teacher told him taxes tend to rise over time. Both of them contribute the same amount every year, $6,000, and both get an 8% average annual return for 35 years. At retirement, both accounts have grown to roughly the same amount, close to $1 million, because the growth on the investments is identical. But here's where the story splits. When Sarah starts withdrawing from her traditional account, every dollar is taxed as ordinary income. If she's in a 22% tax bracket in retirement, she effectively loses over $200,000 of her account to taxes over time. Mike, with the Roth account, withdraws the same amount of money, and he pays zero federal tax on any of it. Same contributions, same investment returns. Completely different outcome, purely because of the account type they checked on a form in their 20s. This is the part nobody explains clearly enough. The 401k doesn't determine how much you retire with. It determines how much of that money is actually yours to keep. But before you assume the Roth is always the better choice, there's a catch. And this is where most online advice oversimplifies things dangerously. The traditional 401k genuinely makes sense for high earners in their peak income years. If you're currently in the 32 or 35% tax bracket, deferring that tax bill to retirement, when you'll likely be withdrawing less and sitting in a lower bracket, can save you real money. A surgeon earning $300,000 a year isn't in the same situation as an entry-level worker earning $40,000. The math is not the same for everyone, and that's exactly why so many people get this decision wrong. They copy advice meant for someone in a completely different financial position. However, there is one problem nobody talks about, and it's arguably the biggest one: required minimum distributions. With a traditional 401k, the IRS eventually forces you to start withdrawing money, whether you need it or not, once you reach a certain age. Right now, that age is 73, and it's scheduled to rise further in the coming years. These forced withdrawals are taxed as income, and they can push retirees into a higher tax bracket than they expected, sometimes even affecting how much they pay for Medicare premiums. A Roth 401k, on the other hand, has no required withdrawals during the original owner's lifetime, which gives retirees far more control over their own money. This single detail, the freedom to decide when and how much to withdraw, is worth more to many retirees than people realize, because it's not just about taxes. It's about control. Now let's talk about the biggest mistake people make with either account, because this mistake has nothing to do with which box you check. The mistake is not contributing enough to get the full employer match. Many companies match a percentage of what you contribute, often 50 cents or a full dollar for every dollar you put in, up to a certain percentage of your salary. If your employer offers a match and you're not contributing enough to receive the entire thing, you are turning down free money, not a discount, not a bonus. Guaranteed, immediate, 100% return on that portion of your contribution. No stock, no crypto, no real estate deal on earth reliably offers that. And here's the detail most people miss. Employer match money almost always goes into a traditional account, even if your personal contributions go into a Roth. That means most people end up with a mix of both account types automatically, whether they planned it or not. This is actually useful because it gives you tax diversification. In retirement, you can choose to withdraw from whichever account makes the most sense that year, based on your tax situation at the time. Before we move on, there's one more thing people almost never consider until it's too late. What happens if you need the money early? Life doesn't always follow a retirement plan. Medical emergencies happen, job losses happen, and when they do, people sometimes turn to their 401k as a last resort. With a traditional 401k, withdrawing money before age 59 and a half typically triggers both regular income tax and a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if you pull out $10,000 in an emergency, you might only see $6,000 or $7,000 of it after taxes and penalties combine. With a Roth 401k, the rules are more nuanced. Because you already paid taxes on your contributions, in many cases you can access the amount you personally contributed without additional tax, although the growth portion still has restrictions before retirement age. Neither account is designed to be an emergency fund, and pulling money out early should always be a last resort. But understanding the real cost of doing so matters, because plenty of people make emergency decisions without realizing how much they're really losing. Let's bust a common myth while we're here. A lot of people believe Roth accounts are just for young people, and traditional accounts are just for people close to retirement. That's an oversimplification. Age matters less than most people think. What actually matters is your current tax bracket compared to your expected future tax bracket, combined with how many years the money has left to grow. A 22-year-old working a lower-paying first job is often in one of the lowest tax brackets they'll ever experience. Paying taxes now, while the rate is low, and letting decades of growth happen completely tax-free, can be incredibly powerful. This is why so many financial educators lean toward recommending Roth accounts for younger workers specifically, not because of age itself, but because of where that age typically falls on the income curve. But someone in their 50s, at the peak of their career, earning the most money they'll ever earn, is often better off deferring taxes through a traditional account and planning to withdraw more strategically later, potentially in a lower bracket after retirement. There's also a middle path that almost nobody talks about, splitting contributions between both. Many 401k plans allow you to contribute to both a traditional and a Roth account in the same year. This isn't complicated to set up, and it can meaningfully reduce the risk of guessing wrong about future tax rates. Instead of betting everything on one outcome, you hedge your position, the same way a smart investor wouldn't put 100% of their money into a single stock. Let's look at one more real-world case, because numbers make this easier to feel. Consider James, a 34-year-old nurse earning $68,000 a year. He's been contributing to a traditional 401k since his first job, mostly because it was the default option and he never changed it. When he finally sits down and runs the numbers with a financial planner, he discovers something surprising. Because of standard deductions and how tax brackets are structured, a large portion of his income each year is actually taxed at 10 or 12%, even though people often assume they're paying much more. He's been deferring taxes at a very low rate today, only to potentially pay a similar or higher rate decades from now, especially once required withdrawals kick in alongside Social Security income. For someone like James, switching future contributions to a Roth 401k could mean paying a small, manageable tax bill now in exchange for a much larger tax-free nest egg later. Contrast that with Elena, a 49-year-old sales director earning $210,000 a year. She's in one of the highest federal tax brackets. For her, every dollar she defers into a traditional 401k shields income that would otherwise be taxed at 32% or more. She fully expects her income, and likely her tax bracket, to drop significantly once she retires and stops earning a six-figure salary. For Elena, the traditional account isn't just convenient, it's mathematically smart. Two different people, two completely different right answers. This is exactly why the debate between these two accounts causes so much confusion online. People take financial advice meant for someone like Elena and apply it to someone like James, or the other way around, without realizing their situations aren't remotely similar. Now here's a historical detail that adds important context. The Roth 401k didn't even exist until 2006. Before that, workers only had the traditional option, so an entire generation of Americans built their retirement savings without ever facing this choice. The Roth account was created specifically to give workers more flexibility and to hedge against the very real possibility that tax rates could rise in the future. Understanding that this option is relatively new helps explain why so many people, even financial professionals trained decades ago, default to old habits and old assumptions instead of reevaluating with fresh eyes. There's another factor that rarely gets mentioned: state taxes. Some states, like Florida, Texas, and Nevada, don't tax personal income at all. Others, like California and New York, tax income at some of the highest rates in the country. If you're currently working in a high-tax state but plan to retire somewhere with no state income tax, that changes the math yet again. Paying tax now while you're in a high-tax state might be worse than deferring that tax until later. Once you've relocated somewhere, your withdrawals won't be taxed at the state level at all. This is the kind of detail that almost never comes up in the checkbox conversation on day one of a new job, yet it can shift the decision entirely. Let's zoom out for a moment, because there's a bigger lesson hiding underneath all of this. This decision reflects something much larger about how Americans build wealth. The belief that there's one universally correct answer, one strategy that works for everyone. In reality, Personal finance is deeply personal. Your income, your age, your career trajectory, and even government policy all shape what the right decision looks like for you specifically. The people who build real wealth over time aren't the ones who found a secret formula. They're the ones who understood the tools available to them, made an informed decision instead of a random guess, and revisited that decision as their life changed. Checking the Roth box at 25 doesn't mean you're locked into that choice at 40. You can adjust your contribution split as your income grows and as tax laws change. So here's what this all comes down to. If you're early in your career and in a lower tax bracket, a Roth 401k often gives you decades of completely tax-free growth, and history suggests today's tax rates may be some of the lowest you'll ever see. If you're in your peak earning years, in a high tax bracket, a traditional 401k can reduce your tax bill today and still make sense, especially if you expect a lower income in retirement. And if you're unsure, splitting your contributions between both isn't a compromise, it's a strategy. It protects you from betting everything on a guess about the future. But above everything else, remember this. The account type matters, but it's the second most important decision you'll make. The first, and by far the most powerful, is simply contributing consistently, especially enough to capture your full employer match. No tax strategy in the world makes up for money that was never invested in the first place. There's one final myth worth clearing up before we close, because it might be the most damaging one of all. The idea that this decision is permanent and unchangeable. It isn't. Most 401k plans let you adjust your contribution split at any time, often instantly through an online portal. You are not locked into whatever choice you made in your 20s. Tax laws change, careers change, income changes, and your strategy is allowed to change right along with them. The workers who end up in the best position at retirement aren't the ones who guessed correctly once and never thought about it again. They're the ones who revisited the decision every few years, especially after a raise, a new job, or a major shift in tax policy. The paperwork you filled out on your first day at work wasn't just an HR formality. It was a financial decision with consequences that stretched decades into your future. And now, unlike most people, you actually understand what that decision means, and more importantly, you understand that it's a decision you're allowed to keep making again and again as your life changes. If this video helped you understand your own retirement account a little better, that's exactly what this channel is here for. Subscribe for more videos about money, investing, and building real wealth, because the difference between struggling financially and retiring comfortably usually isn't luck. It's understanding decisions like this one before it's too late to change them.